Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 79. Kayana breathed in deeply and held the breath there, staring into the molten golden ball in the sky for a moment more, before shying her eyes away. She felt the warmth on her cheeks and released the breath, her lungs filling with the dry desert air. She felt the wind pull across her limbs, her blonde hair falling in waves just past her shoulders. She had cut the cord that had held her hair fast. She would fashion a new one in time. For the moment she basked in the currents of wind. She looked over and saw the other woman slumped in a fatigued sleep, still holding her babe close. Dawn was beginning to break over the horizon. The rocky canyon showed the red sand and rock cast against a quickly changing purple-golden sky. Kayana sat in repose, murmuring softly to Little Island to fetch his older sister Mael, so she could see it too. Island stood rocking back and forth on his stumpy little legs, mouth hanging open, with an expression of glee on his face. He flapped his arms up and down by his sides while he tried to speak something to Kayana. She smiled, knowing he was too young to have spoken his first words yet. She nudged him back to the draped opening of the wagon, and a bleary-looking Millie poked her head out. She still looked a little dazed and under the weather, but she smiled after seeing the beautifully painted sky, the ochres, golds, and purples all melding above them as the horses continued on at a slow pace. Little Island leaped forward, a laugh burbling from him as he came close to where the women were sitting. Kayana wrapped an arm gently around him and pulled him close to her, so he didn't fall off the wobbly, bouncing cart. "How early is it, Kayana?" Millie asked softly, a sickly cast coming over her as she darted a hand to her mouth for a moment. "That draught she gave me! Blech!" Millie shared a smile with Kayana and they both laughed. Kayana was silent a moment, waiting to see if Millie would say more. "Do you think we'll reach the meeting point?" Millie said. "I remember a cramped tent and supplies spilling in piles near my bed. How did we get here?" Millie pursed her lips, unsure if she wanted to ask more or just wait for a response. She had so many questions. Her arm still hurt where it had been pinned under the heavy wooden frame of the caravan wreckage, but she felt much better than before. Her memory was a little fuzzy, and she couldn't quite recall how they had reached the tent in the first place. "Kayana, will you teach me more forms? They're so beautiful. I want to learn. You'll teach me, won't you?" Millie waited expectantly for an answer from the other woman. Kayana laughed a deep belly laugh. "Of course I will." She smiled with a faint tinge at the corner of her eyes. There was no shame in tears. These were tears of happiness. "Why are you crying, Kayana? Are you all right? Did I do something wrong?" Millie inquired seriously. "No, Millie. I am all right now. I am just glad you are safe. You mean the world to me. I have no family any longer since my banishment from my own people. You are my family now." Millie was happy, but she felt lost as well. She remembered now what had happened on the caravan, Jess's final words to her before he pulled the bandit leader over the edge of the rapidly moving wagon train. Gerald, he was gone too. She remembered his jokes. Millie smiled fondly, thinking of him for a moment. She felt that she was to blame. If she had only waited until she was 16, none of the others would have paid with their lives to protect her. Was her life worth that much? She hugged herself, thinking of her mother Marie. The smiling face would always welcome her home. Home was gone now. Tentatively, she reached out to Kayana and squeezed her hand. The other woman showed surprise in her features, but squeezed back fiercely. She loved this woman as if she were her family. Her mother and father had chosen well. She would make the best of it. She couldn't help but get excited about seeing the merchant trains. She hoped they would be exotic sweets and beautiful art that she had heard of coming far from the east. She felt a twinge of pain when she shifted her weight. She hoped her arm would heal soon. She feared even moving it for a risk of causing another break. Combing her reddish curls out of her eyes with her right hand, Millie surged with excitement. The wagon rumbled on, moving past the bend in the rocky terrain, allowing them to see past the high canyon wall. A vast expanse of desert opened back up to their view beyond. Kayana searched for the merchant wagons, but there was no sign. Only dust rumbled across the landscape, the wind picking up as the sun rose higher in the sky. Where had they gone? They could have waited a full day and still be gone. A wave of anxious energy washed through her. She did not know where the next town lay. Their hopes rested with a slumbering woman, weary from the loss of her husband. Kayana did not dare share her unease with Millie or the children. They had a way of sensing the mood in the air, she had found, and there was no sense to worry them yet. Maybe the merchant wagons lay beyond the next stretch of hills. That would be several miles, though, from what she could see. She left the unspoken question unanswered. Gripping the reins, Kayana steeled herself. She must consider the possibility that they would be tracked by the group of men and women they had narrowly escaped from. She worried about dozing off and leaving the others unprotected. If they did not find the group of merchants by midday, they would need to make camp and prepare for the worst. She hoped they had enough food with them. Her feelings of joy quickly turned to worry as she surveyed the silent landscape. Nothing moved out there, under the early rays of light. Nothing she could see.